Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Mosaic, a game by Glenn Drover and put out by Forbidden Games. Now, Mosaic is not your typical Forbidden Games game, so to speak. This is a far more ambitious game in everything from the production, from the gameplay, from the genre, from everything it's doing, but it pays off. It absolutely pays off. Now, Mosaic, as a quick overview of the game, and I'll try to do this as quickly as possible, but the general overview, this is going to be a abstracted civ builder tableau building engine. And it's a game in which you're ultimately going to be taking one action a turn. One action, move on to the next person, rinse, repeat until the game ends. And everything in the game, before I go into the actual individual action breakdown, the general idea of this game is do something to build up your tableau, to do something else, to build up your tableau, to do something else, to further and further increase your actions until at a certain point you start focusing more on cashing in your tableau and cashing in your actions to ultimately get as many points as possible. It is incredibly rewarding to get your stone production up to 47, but it's not going to help you win the game. So it's a tableau builder, and game end will be triggered by basically having 3 empire scorings in the game. What's going to happen is in each of the 4 decks in the game, in the build deck, the technology deck, the population deck, and the taxes and tariffs deck, you're going to have an empire scoring card shuffled in depending on the player count, depending on where it goes in the deck. And once the third one of those 4 cards is revealed, you're going to basically end game, because each of those cards is going to reveal a scoring condition where you're going to score for each of the areas for effectively having area majority in each of the areas on the board. Over here we're set up for a 2-player game, which means these 2 areas are not in play, but you're going to go through each of these areas scoring for who has the most influence there, influence from cities, and influence from units on the board. Do that 3 times, then proceed to end game and end game scoring. The turn sequence in Mosaic is ultimately going to come down to taking 1 action at a time from 8 possible actions. The first action is you can build a wonder. You can pay 20 stone or 5 food to pay a wonder, and that cost will grow greater with each wonder you acquire. You can build something from the build deck, which is either going to be a town, a city, or a project. You can go ahead and build from the population deck. You can increase your population, which is going to be essential, because when you build cities, you're going to need population. So you can increase your population through the population deck. You can alternatively buy a technology from this giant technology card row. You're going to be doing that a lot in this game. This is the biggest and arguably most rewarding deck of cards in the game. Alternatively, you can go ahead and work. Work is when you cash in on that engine you've been building. You add up your population and you add up either your idea, food, or stone production and get that many of that resource. So perhaps you have 7 stone production and 9 population. Boom, you're making 16 stone with a single action. You can have taxes and tariffs where you're going to cash in on either the amount of cities you have on the board or the amount of unique trade goods you have on the board to get a bunch of money from the board, effectively from the game. But you are going to trigger unrest when you tax or tariff your population. So it's going to result in a slight negative VP point modifier at the end of the game. Then you're going to have the military action where you can either build or move your military around the board. And finally, you have your government action, which is usually an action you're going to take once during the game max, because you can only have one government, which means taking it multiple times is a degree of inefficiency as you trade in your original government. And those are going to be the 8 actions in the game. That's basically Mosaic. You're constantly building up your tableau in this game because everything you do gives you more. Build a city. It's going to give you more money. It might give you more food production. It might give you other things in the game. The technologies, just going to give you tons of stuff. You want more ideas. You want more idea production, more stone production, tariff production, tax production, any of those things in the game. You want some population, want some military units. All the technologies in the game are going to give you something either as a one-time use benefit right away or building up your tableau, and additionally they're going to be giving you symbols. You see that these technologies often require symbols on the right side, and then you're going to need those symbols in your tableau in order to get those technologies, as well as the fact that both cities, projects, and technologies will frequently reward you for having those symbols in the game. Not just those, in fact, there's going to be a bunch of other points you're going to manage over here. Up here, you're going to have your wonders, you're going to have your what's it called? You're going to have your wonders, your civilization achievements, and your golden age cards. The wonders are going to be things that you can pay stone and food to acquire and give you varying degrees of points for different things. Maybe you get a straight 12 points. Maybe you get points for every region you control on the board. You can basically gauge different wonders that are going to be more beneficial in different ways, as well as the fact that they contribute to your area control on the board. The golden age cards are going to reward you for having 6 of any one symbol type. There's a variety of symbols in this game, and as soon as you are the first person to achieve 6 of one type, you will get the golden age cards scoring 6 points, as well as getting an in-game benefit to your tableau. And then lastly, we have the civilization achievements, which will again reward you for having some sort of specific metric, not symbols this time, but rather maybe you have 7 unique trade goods. Maybe you have 5 cities, 3 port cities, 12 tax production, a whole bunch of different options in the game that you are trying to achieve those, again, to get 6 points at one at a time. Because in this game, you're going to get points for a variety of things. You're going to get points for all those things I just talked about, the cities, the wonders, the whatnot. You get points for projects, you get points for technologies. you're also going to get points for each of those 3 scorings in the game. Every time you have an in-game scoring, an empire scoring, you're going to go region by region, and the people in the region are going to get points. You're going to have people getting second place points, getting 2 points for having presence or whatnot. But additionally, the person who wins each region will get 3 points plus a point for each city in that region, which could be chunks of points, 5, 6, 7 points at a time, depending on how much is going on in that region. And then finally, when you hit endgame, you're going to get 2 points for every city, 1 point for every town, and then a bunch of points for a variety of other things from your cards, your wonders, all the stuff you slowly but surely acquire throughout the game. That is basically Mosaic, and as short as I can manage. Oh, you'll lose points for unrest as well. If you have unrest and you don't have wonders that get rid of unrest, then you will lose a few points from that as well. And that is basically Mosaic. The last thing I shouldn't say last thing, there's a lot of things, but one other thing I didn't touch upon is every time you're putting down a city, wonder, or town on the board, if you put it on top of one of these symbols, you are either earning a trade good, or alternatively getting one-time benefits like 8 coins, 9 ideas, or perhaps 2 food production, or something along those lines. That's Mosaic. It's an abstracted civ builder where you're just putting things down the board for area control, for the benefits of the spots you're going on, to ultimately achieve points throughout the game as you build up your tableau, and hopefully you're the person who has the most efficient combination of actions you can take throughout the game. The combination of I'm going to do this to do this. I'm going to upgrade my population, then I'm going to get my ideas, then I'm going to cash in my ideas to get 2 of these technologies. Those technologies will further upgrade my population, which again will help me get more of the tariffs, because I'm going to use the tariffs to ultimately start putting down units on the board now that I have money, and I'll use those units to march around different areas, taking away control from other people. Also, at the same time, someone else is going ahead and building up their stone production, and they're trying to do their best to get as many wonders on the board as possible. In fact, they have 3 wonders on the board. That's insane. They're going a completely different direction than you are in this game to the most points. It's an abstracted civ builder, area majority, area controlled, tableau building engine, and there's a lot going on here. There's a lot here, and it's incredibly rewarding in what it's doing. The production value, by the way, is beautiful. The board, with its Mosaic appeal to it, looks absolutely beautiful, very abstracted, but functional at the same time. The miniatures and everything else, keep in mind, prototype and all that, but the level of detail in these is already pretty decent. Hopefully that carries over to the final production copy. The deluxeification, I only have abstracted goods, but if you look on the Kickstarter, link down below, by the way, and also very much prototype. But if you look on the Kickstarter, the deluxeified goods, from the metal coins to the to the improved tokens for all the resources, all those are going to result in a beautiful production quality to this game. And everything builds. I love that in games. Every single action you take in this game is helping you. Every single thing you do is making you more powerful. Now, it's entirely possible you lose the game. That's totally fine. You may lose the game every single time you play, but every time you play, you are building. Every action you take is rewarding. I have talked in the past about how I don't like games that tear you down and force you to struggle to survive. This is a game where you're constantly getting more, you're constantly doing more. Every single action is fun. Sure, someone else got twice as many points as you, but it felt fun losing. It felt a lot of fun along the way losing this game, which is a good time to note that I have never won this game, by the way. I've come close, but I've never actually won this game. I've pursued different pathways from that wonder path I've tried. I've gone heavy on ideas multiple times because I do love ideas. I've tried going heavy on population track. I'm not very good at the game, apparently, but I do so enjoy it along the way. And the pathways to victory are so varied. The people who have won those games, not me, by the way, in case I didn't mention that, but the people who have won those games have pursued different paths. I've seen people go heavy on the point cards in the technology track. I've seen people win through wonders. I've seen people win through dominating area control. There are a lot of pathways to victories, a lot of ways to get points in this game, and the ways you try to pursue those pathways are as varied as they are rewarding in the game. And that 2-hour playtime that they're talking about, it's real. This is a genuine 2-hour playtime. In fact, my most recent game, this game that we just played over here, where I just taught somebody else new the game, was a 90 minutes, including the teach, to play the game from someone who he and I are both huge fans of tableau building. And at the end of the game, we looked up and we're like, that was 90 minutes? That felt like a 2.5-hour long experience, but it was a 90-minute game. It was incredibly fun, and it gave us a giant ton of actual empire and tableau building in that 90-minute experience, but it did so in 90 minutes with a teach. And speaking of the teach in this game is incredibly simple. There's a lot of small things to know about in the game, as is usual in the game. You're gonna need someone who knows the game flow, knows what to do, knows how to manage different aspects of the game. But the game really comes down to take one action, rinse and repeat, go around the board. From those 8 actions, a few of them you're not gonna take that often. The rest of them you're gonna be taking on a majority of the time. You're gonna be doing build, population, or technology. I'd even argue most of the time you're doing build or technology along with work, and then a few other actions thrown in. You'll tax and tariff a few times. You'll do government one time. If you go heavy on military, you'll be doing that a lot more, but I would say more often than not, military will be a smaller amount of your actions in the game. Wonders, you wish you were taking 7 wonder actions. You'll probably build 2 or 3 wonders in the game max, depending on how heavily aggressive you go that way. So the actions are incredibly simple. It's all about building up that engine, getting a little bit more here to generate a little bit more to rinse and repeat as you go through the game. Now, I do have the complaints about the game. I do have complaints, and again, prototype stage, and I would say many of the complaints, because it's going to be a long list. I'll warn you that right now. This is a decently long list of small nitpicks I have. I would argue that most or none of them, no, most, if not all of them, are minor nitpicks, but let's go through them one at a time. So, to begin with, I feel this game needs a player aid, like absolutely needs a player aid, like a little handy dandy player, like a little booklet you can open that every player has access to, because you have so many cards that you're trying to be mindful of. You have a chunk full of civilization achievements that everyone's trying to be mindful of, each giving you some small variation of the thing you're trying to go for and be mindful of as you build out your puzzle. Those 6 points here and there, they can manage, not in the games I play, because I always lost by more than 6 points, but they can matter. A bunch of these combined can matter, these points, and having an idea of what's actually on the table, the various accomplishments you're going for. I mean, this is a big board, and we haven't even talked, I'm going to show you on the overhead camera, we haven't even talked about how big the individual boards are, although if my understanding from the Kickstarter is they are making those smaller because they're intimidatingly large. But knowing the civilization achievements is important. Knowing the Golden Age cards is important. Knowing every single wonder on the board is important. Knowing the governments is important. You need a player aid for all of the different things that are static in the game. Not the things that are coming from card decks that are slowly being revealed, but the things that are ever present from the beginning of the game that needs to have some sort of player aid so people are not constantly trying to lean over to see what those things are before you get halfway through the game, say, I'll be taking that card because I have 6 of that symbol, and then 2 other people look up and they're like, I've had 6 of that symbol for the past 2 minutes, or 2 game turns, or whatever it is, but you get the idea. So yeah, a player is going to be essential in this game. The board, as pretty as it is, and as functional as it mostly is, could be clearer. Some of these lines over here, depending on where you're going, are a little bit hard to see, and result in basically squinting at the board, doing setup primarily. Once you get the game going, it's not as bad, but doing setup primarily to try to figure out where everything is. And speaking of setup, the setup process is a little bit more tedious than I would like. It basically involves putting down 3 tiers of different tokens on the board, from the ports to the key points to the trade tokens, putting them all down, facing them, like flipping them all down, shuffling them over, putting them all in different locations, then flipping them up, and then removing all the ones that are null tokens effectively, where nothing is there. It's a lot of, it'll take a few minutes if you have everyone chipping in and helping at the same time, but a single player doing it, I mean, honestly, I could probably teach the game faster than I can set it up if I'm doing this by myself. The card and symbol management in this game as well is a little bit more than I would like. It's a lot of, and again, nitpicks. I'm going to be nitpicking about a lot of things here. But basically, you see this card area over here, where I have a million little different symbols, and those symbols are, I'm trying to track how many I have at any given point. Do I have enough to get that 6? Am I stacking this up? And by the way, this isn't even end game over here. You can have more cards than this by the time you hit the end of the game. So all those cards, and some of them you need to kind of separate, because some of them have in-game effects or scoring you have to be mindful of. There's a whole bunch of things that you're kind of trying to track here, and it's a little bit fiddly. It's still a good game, but a little bit fiddly over there. The military. And this is going to be my biggest complaint, but I also want to note that they're already addressing this in the Kickstarter, and again, prototype. But the military in this game, I've played this game a bunch, and I would say every single game, with one exception where I tried to really go hard on military just to prove I could, I would say almost every single game I have played of Mosaic has resulted in most, if not all of the players in the game barely really touching the military. Because there's a rule where you can only recruit 2 military units per turn, which is basically 2 influence. You could also get 2 influence by building a city. So unless you want to take actions moving your military on the board, or unless you manage to get enough technology cards that reward you for having military in different ways that actually make military more rewarding, the default status quo of military, in my opinion, from the games I've played, is that it is weaker than other pathways. Again, that changes if you get technology cards. It does change if you try to get technology cards, if you try to go heavy on military, so you have the flexibility to pivot and adjust. There are benefits to military, but I would argue that it seems from our plays that military is currently underpowered. Now, there's a few ways to potentially address that, some of which I believe they are already doing. They're already adding some aspects to the game. I don't remember the exact details, and I haven't played with the rules, so check the Kickstarter out if you want to see more there. But they are adding ways that give you more military freedom. Additionally, I would say in our games, what we did try one game is we did try adjusting that cap to 3 units per turn. And that totally changed how much military showed up in the game. It was not overpowering. It worked for us in that one game. Keep in mind, this is a house rule on a prototype based on one play of that house rule. So take it with a heavy, heavy grain of salt. But overall, we have found military to be less present or dominating than we'd like, and there are ways to tweak or adjust around that both they are working on, and as well as we personally house ruled with one game. And then lastly, similarly, trade goods feel a little bit underpowered as well. The concept of picking up trade goods on the board, there's a few ways that trade goods will benefit you. There's going to be a civilization achievement that gives you points for having 7 trade goods, and then otherwise you're going for tariffs on the board that will give you points for they'll give you money whenever you take the tariff action to get trade goods. The problem is building up those trade goods takes long enough and enough time and trouble and energy that trade goods are rarely the better choice for us, or at least seemingly rarely the better choice for us compared to picking up other things that would give us more resources right away, rather than the trade goods slowly trickling in across multiple tariff actions, or unless you were going for 7 unique trade goods. So again, a lot of small nitpicky complaints. I would say the military one is the biggest one. Every single other one, I could deal with it. It's fine. It's a great game with the small nitpicks along the way. The military one is the biggest one, where I want the military to feel powerful. I want the military to be more present, because the military is not overly aggressive. It's not a game where you're tearing down other people's cities for the most part, with the exception of 1 or 2 cards, which could result in removing other military. For the most part, it's just area control, and so it just comes down to moving units around the board for that control aspect. And I'd like to see a drop more, not a lot more. It's a civilization building game, not heavily an area control game, but it does have area control, and I'd like to see it taken advantage of. As far as what I can see others not liking, it's going to be primarily 2 things. The cards are potentially simple enough that they don't give you enough of a puzzle that perhaps 15, 20 plays in, it is not as rewarding as I'd like, because many of the cards are going to ultimately come down to getting the same things again and again. You get, 3 more idea production, more food production, more stone production, get 5 ideas, get a few points, get a point for every symbol. For the most part, a big chunk of the technology cards are going to fall into the same vein of what they do and how they do them. There are going to be exceptions. There are going to be interesting cards for sure, but a lot of them are building on the core tableau that you're working on here, and they're doing so in ways that are not necessarily as innovative as constantly as I'd like. There are exceptions, like I said. There are going to be cards that say not just get 2 food production, but get 2 food production for each thing over here that you have with a max of 10. Those cards are more interesting. They provide more of a puzzle, more of a way to try to constantly shift through it. But the bulk of the game relying on that core tableau, I could see this one becoming less interesting the more you play it. Although for right now, we're a decent number of plays in, and so far it is immensely rewarding, and we're not shying away from it just yet. And then more importantly, I would argue that the directional overload, especially for AP prone players, for analysis paralysis players, could be high in this game. There's only one action you take a turn. It's only one action. It's one simple action from 8 actions, rinse and repeat until the game is over. But the aspect of every action impacting your future actions can result in players sitting there trying to think through, well, if I buff my technology, if I buff my population, then I increase my ideas, then I buy that idea, then I get a town, that's going to be marginally less efficient than if I tariff first, then get the town, then do my population, then the idea. Everything builds off everything else. Everything cascades off everything else. You're going to have to basically deal with the fact that you're going to just take an action, move on to the next one, rinse and repeat, and rely on half gut, half math, half just playing the game again and again and again to guide you, as opposed to perfectly min-maxing every single move as you go through this game. As far as final thoughts on Mosaic for me is absolutely a 5 out of 5. This is everything I like in games. Every action rewards you. I love that in games. I don't like feeling punished. I'm here to have a fun time. And I haven't won Mosaic yet I've had a fun time every single time I've played it. This is one of the most rewarding tableau builders I've played. Well, actually, take it back. I take that back. It is not the most rewarding tableau builder I've played, but it is almost certainly the most rewarding tableau builder I've played in the time frame it gives me. Giving me 90 minutes to 2 hours per game, and the amount of stuff I do in that game, and the amount of directions I can pursue in that game, it is incredibly rewarding for the playtime. It is a lot of fun, multiple paths to victory. One of the things I did suggest in terms of keeping that game fresh every single time, remember I mentioned that the game potentially over time can become less interesting. One of the things I mentioned to them that I've seen them implementing on the Kickstarter is the idea of having subsets of things available in the game. Have 15 wonders and you only ever have 5 per game. Have 15, civilization achievement cards, you only have whatever per game. If you give a larger degree of things and then a subset of those things, whether it's governments, whether it's wonders, whether it's the golden age cards, and whether it's the civilization achievement cards or anything else, those things can result in keeping the game fresh and keeping the puzzle fresh every single time you play it. That said, I am eager to jump back into Mosaic. This is a prototype that I will continue to play as I go through it because, well, it's just that much fun. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video. Link to the Kickstarter down below. Make sure to check that out. It is a solid game. If you like this style of game, if you like this genre, if you like Civ Builders, if you like Terraforming Mars, if you like any of these things, Mosaic is a game you're going to want to check out. Until next time, I'm Alex. I think I said that already. Either way, have a good one.